Hello, how are you? I am back again, and today I thought I would do a quick video on my 25 favourite podcasts. Now, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I am a full podcast addict. I'm plugged into them pretty much all the time, and yeah, I really do love a good podcast. I don't watch much TV, but I do listen to a lot of podcasts and also audiobooks. So yeah, I thought I would tell you 25 that I think you should subscribe to, and yeah, let's just get going. Also, if you haven't ever listened to a podcast, there's a few different places that you can get them from, like iTunes. Also, you can have a look on Google and just literally type in the podcast name, and every podcast has a website where you can listen to it online. Also, you can listen on a platform called Stitcher, which is free, or there is literally a podcast app called Podcasts, and then you just go into Podcasts. Let me do it now. And then you go to the button on the right hand side, bottom corner, press search, type in the name of the podcast, and it will flash up, and you can just subscribe or you can just listen. So yeah, that is how I listen. I personally listen on the podcast app, but occasionally if I'm on my computer and my phone is in the other room, I'll go onto Stitcher and listen that way too. So anyway, I thought I would talk about 25 podcasts that I love, and hopefully you'll find some new podcast inspiration. So the first one I want to mention is super easy, a complete no-brainer. It is Serial. This is a podcast that most people started listening to podcasts because of. They really launched truly 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 podcasts. It's such a good series, and if you haven't listened to Serial, now is the time to subscribe, and it's a great place to start. Also, from the makers of Serial, who are This American Life, there is S-Town, another great podcast. I think it's 4 to 6 episodes long, a little bit shorter, very different, lots of twists and turns. I'm not going to tell you too much because it's very good and I wouldn't want to give anything away, but do try S-Town, it's bloody brilliant. Next, for the bloggers, I want to recommend 2 podcasts. One is called A Beautiful Mess, which comes from the bloggers A Beautiful Mess, who are amazing. I really like their podcast, and I really like their blogs and their Instagram. And yeah, and also A Drink with James, who is a little bit different. He is the CEO, MD, founder, I don't know, of a media agency who works a lot with bloggers and just kind of like helps guide you through how to be a content creator, how to work with brands, how to monetize, how to be a creator who is making money, and be a person and be a business person and reply to emails and all those kind of things. So I thought they would be quite helpful for all the fellow bloggers out there. Next, if you like to listen to something a little bit more businessy, I really like Household Name. It's just really interesting. It's kind of like Brands You Know, Stories You Don't, and it's a really fun and interesting and informative podcast. There was a really great episode about Veuve Clicquot, which was amazing. There was another one about Jello, and it's a really good podcast. I learn a lot, and it's just very interesting for anybody who's interested in brands and business and the stories behind brands and the stories behind businesses, and it's really interesting. It's really good. Next, I love this podcast. It's called Criminal. You probably know it already. It's amazing. I'm doing the obvious podcast as opposed to the unobvious ones. This is a really obvious podcast, but it's so good. And if I cannot sleep in the middle of the night, I will put on an episode of Criminal, and it often helps me go back to sleep because Phoebe Judge's voice is just so soothing. Next, you've probably heard of this one too, but it's very good. It's called Dirty John. It's about a con artist. There's a murder. There's a lot going on in this podcast. It was really great. It was also made into a Netflix series, which I liked, but I preferred the podcast. Next, Endless Thread. Now, this is actually all about stories that come from Reddit. So there's a lot of weird and wonderful things with this podcast. Listened to one the other day on shrinkflation, which was very interesting. But there's loads of great, interesting stories on this podcast, so it's well worth a listen. Next is Filling the Void. I love this podcast. It's all about hobbies. Well worth a listen. Very good. Very funny. Very interesting. I really like it. It's on a little bit of a hiatus at the moment because of quarantine in America. But yeah, I love it. It's really, really good. Next is Heavyweight. I love this podcast. It's just so well written, so well produced, so much thought and love and everything goes into it. It's very, very good. It's about revisiting moments from the past, kind of making them right. I know that sounds weird, but I promise it's very, very good. There's so many good episodes, but I would probably tell you to go for Gregor. Next is Man in the Window. This one is for all the true crime fans out there. This is about the Golden State Killer. It's fascinating. It's so good. Whew. Next, I want to recommend Love and Radio. Weird, wonderful, very well done, worth a listen to. Can be a little strange at times, but what's wrong with that? Next, Mogal Series 1. This is about the world of hip hop and a very, very, very influential music manager in the world of hip hop. And it's really like a history class of hip hop and New York and I don't know, just that whole world, which I don't really know a huge amount about, but I loved Series 1. I truly thought it was amazing. Next, another podcast I've shouted about many times, Mystery Show. There's only 6 episodes, but it is a brilliant podcast. I would probably start with the episode Belt Buckle or Britney. Britney is a very good episode too. Next, Reply All. Again, so many great episodes, but there was one recently that I really enjoyed called Missing Hit, which was episode 158. Very, very good. Totally worth a listen to. All the episodes are standalone, so you can just dip in and dip out, but 158 is a great place to start. Next, Root of Evil, another one for the true crime fans. This was so good. This was like so good. It's all about a man who could potentially be the killer of the Black Dahlia, and it was fascinating. The motive that they have in mind is crazy, and the whole story of the family surrounding this mystery is just a wild ride, well worth listening to, especially if you like true crime. Next, I love Sinisterhood. I love these girls, they're so fun. If you like My Favorite Murder, but you want something a little bit different, I would say go for this one. I just love it. I think it's a great podcast. They're currently working on a 2-parter about Britney Murphy. Next, The Alarmist. I love this podcast. It is kind of like a history lesson. Oh, that's my alarm. I've got to go put something in the oven. Give me a second. So the next one is The Alarmist. That is a comedy meets history class kind of podcast. Really good. I learn a lot, and it's also like, who's to blame? Let's not let history repeat itself. Very good, very funny, and I know in my heart this is a 5-star podcast. Right now they're on 4.5 stars, and we've got to get them up. Next, The Dream. This is a really good podcast. The first series was all about MLMs, multi-level marketing. Second series is all about the wellness industry. Very good podcast, very well done. Great for all the skeptics out there. Next, the Bechdel Cast. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but it looks at film, women in film, people of color in film, and just kind of like diversity in general. It's a bigger conversation that we all really need to be thinking about, and it's a really fun and interesting podcast where they just deep dive into a lot of our favorite films. It's really good. I would probably say start with the episode Legally Blonde. That was a real favorite of mine. Next, another really obvious choice, but This American Life. I would probably start with the one with the breakup song. That's amazing. Or The Car Sales Room. Next, you must remember this. Stories from the first century of Hollywood. So good. I would probably say start with the Dead Blonde series. It's amazing, like truly amazing. So much you will learn about old Hollywood. So interesting and just so good. Dead Blonde series, amazing. Next, I'm gonna flip this bad boy around, and yeah, we need to talk about Britney. All about Britney Spears. So good. Like, she's so fascinating, and it's such a good podcast, and it's so joyful and interesting and really, again, deep dives into Britney, and I'm here for it. And then finally, quite an intense podcast, a funny one to end it on, but you know, what are you gonna do? This one is called This Is Actually Happening, and it is a wild ride of things that happened. It's like every episode is a bit of a monologue, and it's telling the story of something that actually happened, hence the name. And it's a wild ride. It's so good. Take a deep breath, go listen. It's really well done, really, really good. And I'm a big fan of this podcast. And that, my friends, is 25 podcasts that I think you should listen to. Some of them you will probably heard of already. Some of them are hopefully new to you. If you're an influencer, there's some for you. If you like true crime, there's some for you. If you like comedy, there's some for you. And if you like a little bit of history and learning, hopefully there's something for you too. So I hope that helps. Let me know if you have any podcast suggestions for me. I'm always up for a new podcast. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. And go enjoy some podcasts now. Thank you so much. Goodbye.